Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I too want to congratulate Dr. Dumras, whom I've known for many years, and thank Rita Perez for her presentation. I like the fact that the department is moving to try to help schools and support schools. And I hope at some point the Council on Basic Ed takes up the issue of financial distress, because that is obviously having a strong impact, not only in Philadelphia, where I come from, but across the state. In Philadelphia, there was an article today in the Philadelphia
I'm sorry,
Inquirer.
I apologize.
Yeah.
State your name for the...
I'm sorry, my name is Elliot. I will do that. I will do that. This is really not my remarks. This is off the cuff until they get passed around. But I will do that, I promise you. In the Philadelphia Inquirer today, there was an article about counselors. There's at one school in Philadelphia that has one counselor for 3,000 children. The school that I volunteer at has a counselor half a day, a high school that has a counselor half a day a week. And so we're in pretty big financial distress. Title I funds have been cut dramatically. And so a lot of the support systems that were talked about today would be very difficult to do across the state because of the financial distress. But that's not what my remarks are about. So my handout includes my remarks on pages 1 and 2. On pages 3 and 4, I have sample questions from the math and biology Keystone exams. And page 5 is an article that has some information about some things that are happening in other states with respect to things like Keystone exams, test requirements. So I'm going to discuss all of this in my testimony. So my name is Elliot Seif, and I'm a longtime Pennsylvania educator, currently retired, who continues to be active in the education community and to write a lot about what it means to educate children in a 21st century world. I'm testifying about the Chapter 4 revisions today before the Council of Basic Education, since I could not attend the State Board meeting tomorrow, and I know many of you will be involved in the discussion tomorrow and in the decisions that are going to be made tomorrow. In previous testimony to the State Board in opposition to the implementation of Keystone exam requirements, I focused on a number of things. The significant problems of using standardized tests as graduation gatekeepers, the duplication of effort since tests like these are already given to students at the high school level, the high implementation costs for both the state and the schools, the bureaucratic complexity and difficulties of administering the tests, things like 3 times a year, the modular nature of the exams, the difficulties of using them as final exams because of when the tests are going to be given, the need for tutoring, the difficulties of implementing a project for those who fail, and other things as well. The increased dropout rates that will occur, this is to me a very serious problem, once the requirements are in place, the diversion of resources to implement the tests and the time diverted to test prep that deprives students of strong school programs, and more. And all of this on top of the severe budget cuts that have already reduced programs and services in many, if not most, school districts across the state. But today I'm not here to dwell on those problems. I hope that you are now familiar with them and realize that parents, legislators, and educators across the state are also waking up to them, are beginning to understand the implications of these requirements, and are increasingly in opposition to new Keystone exam graduation requirements. Rather, today I want you to simply understand why these tests are a very poor way to judge college and career readiness. So in order to do this, I am providing you with examples of 8 model test questions, 4 biology and 4 math, taken directly from samples provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. I did not include examples from literature because the sample questions often do not contain enough information to be able to answer them. That is, the readings weren't often included, so it was difficult and took up a lot of room. Also, these questions are randomly selected. I did not try to select difficult or trick questions. You can yourself look at all the sample questions in booklets provided by PDE if you want to check this out. So I'm going to give you 1 minute or so to look at the questions on pages 3 and 4 and consider whether or not you could answer them. I'm just going to take a minute now to ask you to just look at those questions, and then I'll give you a couple of questions to reflect on. You'll see on page 3 is the math and page 4 is the biology. I have some for the audience too, if you want to see that, just a few. Just a few.
Elliot, I know we're not supposed to interact here, but
Sure, that's okay.
If I was at the end of the course right now, I could probably answer this, but considering that I haven't seen it in 40 years, perhaps I can't. So,
Okay.
Which goes to the end of course exam argument, but thank you.
Okay, I will ask you to reflect on some questions. They're not, the things I'm going to ask you to reflect on are not necessarily only whether or not you can answer these questions. So do you have a feel for them, at least a little bit of a feel for them now? So if you do, I'd like you to consider the following reflective questions. Is the knowledge in these questions necessary for every student to know in order to be able to do college level work, to be career ready? That's question number 1. If a student answers these questions correctly, do they demonstrate that they have developed the skills necessary for college work or career opportunities? For example, does correctly answering these questions demonstrate a student's reading comprehension, study skill competence, research skills, writing skills, analysis skills, creativity skills, the ability to work collaboratively? Number 3, if a student answers these questions correctly, does that mean he or she is prepared for college level work? Number 4, if a student does not answer enough of these questions correctly to score proficient on one or more tests, does that mean that he or she is not able to do college level work? In other words, if somebody doesn't score proficient, does that necessarily mean they shouldn't go to college? And 5, if a student is proficient on 2 or of the 3 tests, he or she would not be able to graduate from high school. Does not passing any one of the tests, for example, biology test, mean that a student is unprepared for college level or incapable of career work? Now, I ask you that because I think these are really important questions. Should those 3 tests and more down the line be gatekeepers for students who, let's say, pass their courses, 4 years, take a 4-year high school education, pass their courses, do lots of things in school? Should these be gatekeepers for deciding on whether or not a student graduates from high school? If, after reflecting on these Keystone exam sample questions, you still believe that these tests should be a requirement for high school graduation for every student, then go ahead and vote for the Chapter 4 regulation changes tomorrow. But if, like me, you now wonder whether questions like these should be the gatekeepers for graduation for all students, as opposed to 4 years of high school work, tests, papers, projects, etc., perhaps some other accountability issues, which I can get into if you like, then I urge you to start a process to set aside the Keystone exam requirements for graduation so that a different accountability system can be put into place. One that potentially negates 4 years of high school work and potentially does not negate 4 years of high school work and does not arbitrarily determine a student's ability to graduate by whether they pass these exams. I personally believe that if you continue down the Keystone exam requirements path, you will be doing a profound disservice to Pennsylvania schools and current and future students. Note, too, that several other states are now beginning to move to eliminate the graduation testing requirements because of the problems they have caused for many students. And I attached an article on page 5 for you to look at, a May article from USA Today. If you wish to further discuss how to raise standards and increase rigor in Pennsylvania schools, I would be glad to do so in the future. I actually think that Dr. Perez's comments give a better example of how to do that in the future than to institute these exams. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide these comments to you today.
Thank you. Next.
I appreciate being able to address this body, and I sit here fully aware of the power that you hold over the lives of children in this Commonwealth, and I hope that you do too. I've come to challenge you as a board to have the courage to remove the Keystone Examinations requirement for high school graduation from Chapter 4. Those of us out in the hinterland, we're always afraid that appointees have been placed to carry out the policy vision of the person who appoints them. But I hope that you're here understanding that you have immense, unbounded power over the lives of kids in this Commonwealth. And I hope that each of you is weighing your own conscience when you consider what will happen in the society of Pennsylvania if 60% of the kids are pushed out of school with no access to a future. And some of those children will be in your bloodline. People can come if they live off the public dole, they have grants and they do research and they chatter about what they believe. But if you have not walked with the homeless and the poor, you have no idea how people in this Commonwealth are suffering. And to add to that chaos is unconscionable. Any number, the Attorney General's research reflects in his Defending Childhood investigations that 60–65% of our kids are living with emotional and psychological trauma, which is a medical condition, which impedes learning. It behaves in the body in ways that interfere with successful school performance. And if you're going to do regulations on high school graduation and such, you really need to make yourself aware of this medical condition so that you can be more balanced in your perspectives on how come kids aren't doing well in school. This is a national issue. America is not kind to children, and they are wounded. And it is reflected in the pervasiveness of failure on high-stakes tests. And it is why other states are already having to back up off this harsh, cruel, and unusual punishment. I'm 17, I flunk a test, my future ends. Think about that. Think about the adversity of my life because of a test score. Think about that. When we all know, scientifically it is unsupported, that any test score predicts human potential. No test score predicts human potential. I just think I'm finished. I hope you've heard me. Because the families, and they don't all look like me. We had testimony 2 Mondays ago in Tredyffrin, Easttown, in the school district where I pay taxes, Narnet Valley. We think we live in heaven. We have everything. We have more tennis courts than most universities. Our kids, because they're worthy and deserving, take the marching band to Australia. We have everything. There is a young white girl there with a 3.97 high school Q who cannot pass the algebra test. She has taken it twice. She will not get a diploma. If she takes the project option, her diploma will be stamped project. The Haitians just got peasant off their birth certificate. We're going to start stamping our children project. It's another form almost of eugenics. Like we can sort superior people from inferior people by giving them a rigorous test. Life is a rigorous test. None of us were at 17 who we are today. And I just challenge you to have the courage to protect the children. Protect the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Hello, I'm a little empowered by those last two commentators. The Keystone exams are part of the Common Core. My name is Lois Kaneshiki, Kaneshiki. I live in the Hollidaysburg Area School District in Blair County, and I'm associated with Pennsylvanians Against Common Core, but my comments are my own. This wasn't in my original comments, but I was a little shocked to hear we're doing a study on mandating dating violence education when the Common Core dictates the standards and we only have 15% leeway on what else we can teach. So why would we include mandating dating violence education unless it's part of the core that I haven't read yet? The first statement in the Chapter 4 revision states in bold capital letters, applicable only to the public schools of the Commonwealth. But the tests will be applicable to everyone. Everyone will have to take the Keystone exams. Everyone will have to take the Common Core aligned high school graduation test. Everyone in education knows that it is the high stakes assessments that drive curriculum. Therefore, when you say the core will only be applicable to public schools, it may be technically true, but in practice, it is extremely misleading, if not an outright falsehood. So, after multiple assessments throughout a student's public school experience, you're still not confident that the student has gained proficiency in his courses of study. After he has spent half his life with the trained professionals and has supposedly passed every academic year, you are still going to require yet one more test before he graduates. Why? Our students are already taking SATs, ACTs, Keystones, AP exams. And I understand that the AP exams now may replace Keystones if they pass the AP exam, but what's the difference because they're all going to be aligned with the core anyway. Now you're going to add to that list yet another test needed to graduate. What is the point? Secretary Dumaresque stated that students could opt out of graduating testing and instead do a graduation project. Who is going to evaluate the project and on what criteria? The criteria obviously also has to be aligned with the Common Core. So how does that address the parents' objections? Standards are not curricula. Yes, we've been told that multiple times, that we are free to develop our own curricula. Standards are not curriculum. Taken from the state's own Race to the Top grant application, I quote, "We anticipate that given the limited resources most districts have for curriculum improvements, the overwhelming majority of our districts will rely on SAS Portal to bring their instructional program in line with the new standards. We there was just an article in my local newspaper this week that one of our school districts will not purchase any more new textbooks. Everything will be online, and I assume a lot of it will be directly from the portal. The department shall not collect personal family data due to the implementation of Pennsylvania core standards contained in Appendix A2. That's from the Chapter 4 revisions. We saw it right in the grant application, the personal data that's being collected. Maybe it's not new data. You're going to be collecting personal data. So don't tell the people you're not collecting personal data. Let's be honest. Let's show them what we signed in the previous grant applications. A description of how the school district will accomplish coordination, this is again from your Chapter 4 revisions, community-operated infant and toddlers. Okay? This is public education. Now we're going down to infant and toddlers. Where are those resources going to come from? What intervention does the public sector have in the lives of infant and toddlers? That's startling to me. And that's part of, I know it's part of the core. The idea that there is a need for new standards and that this is going to improve upon our current failing system is a red herring. We still have not been told what was wrong with the old standards. Some of you may be aware of, unfortunately Senator Dinniman is not here today, but years ago in his school district, they determined that the most important thing in education are the quality of the teachers. And they set out, they established a consortium in their IU focused on recruiting the best school teachers in the country to their district. And that's what they did, and they established one of the best school districts in Pennsylvania, if not maybe the country. Because they recognized it wasn't their standards, it was the teachers. And all you have to do is ask any parent that the first thing they do when their kids get their schedule for the next school year is find out what teachers their kids got, because they know it could mean success or failure for their child for the next academic year. Funny how the administrations don't know what teachers are good and bad, but all the parents seem to know. So why are we pretending that we need to get more testing and new nationally aligned standards and an intrusive pre-K through workforce database on our kids? Why did the legislature refuse to enact the governor's request to eliminate the last in, first out system of laying off teachers if teachers must be laid off? Do excellent teachers really need guaranteed tenure? Aren't excellent teachers in such demand that in a free market, headhunters will be fighting to recruit them, offer them more money, and lure them to better working conditions? Who requires tenure and last in, first out? If a school will not serve a student to the parent's satisfaction, why can't that parent pull the student out and send him to another public school of their choosing? Why are families stuck in schools by virtue of their street address? Eliminating forced busing would get rid of these issues. Let the marketplace handle busing. I bet it would be cheaper and serve the public better. How would you like it if you were forced to shop at a location by virtue of your street address? You would resent it immensely, and you would probably be moved to take some action against such an inane policy. And that's not nearly as important as a child's education, is it? At the last Senate hearing, the panel was asked about costs of Common Core implementation, and there was no answer given. And I don't understand why there was no answer given, because we stated in a previous grant application that Pennsylvania requested $400 million for the Race to the Top to accelerate school improvement, and that in addition they would need $140 million in school improvement funds, an ongoing phase-in of $2.6 billion to districts and new state monies in order to implement these new standards. So that's over $3 billion stated in the Race to the Top application, yet we couldn't give any answer of what it was going to cost to implement Common Core. And that's without even knowing if it's going to do any good. Because when we filled out these applications, we didn't even know what the standards were. Which is why the Secretary of Education in Texas turned it down. Let's be honest about the Common Core. It's about the money. Federal money is today's heroin in our society. It feels good when you first get your initial fix, but after the withdrawal symptoms start to surface, you will need another fix just to keep going. It seems like we need our fix of federal dollars, and like a drug addict, we will say whatever it takes to get that fix, even if it means selling out our children in the process. Tomorrow you'll be voting to adopt the recommended Chapter 4 revisions. When you go home this evening, I beg you to read this latest report on Common Core by the Pioneer Institute on their website. I have a copy of it right here. I could leave if anybody wants it. It's written by Tom Scott, the former Secretary of Education in Texas, who, unlike Pennsylvania, refused to sign on to the Common Core without seeing the standards first. We owe it to the children to read this before you cast your vote. Finally, Chairman Wittig, you repeatedly told us at the last board meeting that you were trying to get us out of Common Core. These Chapter 4 changes do not do that. It is not too late to go back and to remedy the mistakes of the past. Our future depends on it.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. To address you again, and it's not a bathroom break. So thank you. I have papers for you, which I'll hand out afterwards, if I may. I'm just going to hit some highlights of the papers I'd like you to look at before voting for Chapter 4 of Common Core. I have gone. Janice Bowman. I have gone to the meetings before, or also watched it on the internet. I'd like to answer some questions that weren't answered dealing with Common Core. It was stated that Pennsylvania Academy standards, academic standards, is not Common Core. Well, I do have a paper here which you'll have. It's called the Evaluation of the Alignment between PA Academic Standards and the Common Core Standards done in 2010. So we are Common Core. I only did one page. You can look it up on the internet. You'll be getting that copy. The next thing I want to bring up that we do have data information, which we're told, no, we're not data mining, it's not personal, all that. And I did find a study you might want to look at called Alignment and the States. 3 approaches to aligning national assessment of educational progress with state assessment, other assessments, and standards. I gave you a copy of that. You can look it up. So we are data mining, and this will explain the several different methods. The next thing I gave you some information on who is behind Common Core. One of the debates, we were told we're picking on Bill Gates and all the other people, putting money into the program, and where does the money come from? I gave you information who wrote it. It is not people like you're saying. Here's the information, here's the money source. You will have that. That's the third part of the sheets that I'm giving you. Now, where is the money, the cost factor? We don't hear about the cost, which Lois brought up. I actually did a study for Allentown, which Rita should know, on what it cost us. This report was called the Academic Standards and Assessment Midway Point Review. Now, there are 2 assessments that were done per schools, where the money came from. It's on the very back here. You will see numbers written in red. Those are actually grant money. Then you're going to see something called district money. I am going to put a right to know into Allentown because I want to know what the taxpayers paid. The green is the taxpayer money. The red is the grant money that it has cost us so far, which is in millions of dollars, without including the green part. The other thing is we need new computers in about 1 or 2 years in Allentown, 17,000 plus students. I don't know where they're going to get the money, so I don't know how you can even implement a program that needs computers for children, and you can't afford the computers every so many years. That's a cost factor we don't even talk about. The next group of papers I gave you is dealing with teachers that are fighting against Common Core. Teachers are in a bad position because if they speak out, especially now in town, they're going to lose their job and other places. And I'm told by some of the representatives, oh, well, teachers don't talk to me, superintendents don't talk to me, they must like it. They don't. And so I brought you some proof about gag orders, telling them that they can't talk out from other states because they couldn't find Pennsylvania yet if it happened. I also found other teachers actually giving up their jobs to talk out. So I gave you some information on that. And this page here is the states. We actually have blogs, which is the best reporters, because our news source is not really true. But if you go online, the only state is Vermont that doesn't have a website fighting Common Core. We have 49 states fighting Common Core. So it's not just Pennsylvania. So that's here for you. Then the one thing I want to bring up to you that I really hope you take a look at after we're doing this Chapter 4 thing is what is being taught with this Common Core. I'm really concerned with the National Sex Education Standards that the Core is teaching. I gave you information here. In here is a book that I'd like you to take a look at, because I'm not sure which schools have this in Pennsylvania, but I call it porn. And I'm sorry, if I find out a school that I'm at has this, I want to know who's being arrested. My taxpayer money is going for this stuff. And I'm looking. I requested a list of all the books being used for certain subjects in Allentown. I was told they had to talk to their lawyer first before they could give it to me, because I threatened to arrest them if I saw this kind of stuff. So I gave you information on the sex information. This is how to have sex. And we're talking about dating rape. We're promoting it. So I don't know why we're looking at stopping dating violence and stuff when we promote it. Kindergarten through 12th grade. We're promoting it. Here's the information. So I'm hoping you as a school board with your policies, check out what's being taught in these schools. And when we fight it, we're told, oh no, we can't do this. Well, I'm telling you, there are a lot of pastors out there that my group here, We the People, go to, that are going to fight this. And parents, because they didn't realize this was being taught. So you think Common Core, with this porn stuff with it, you got a problem. And we're not going to let it go. The other thing that I have here, the last thing is just some articles about the complications of the Common Core. And yes, this does affect every school in the state, so there's an article here. Basically, what I see us doing is just tearing our system apart. We're losing the child. You don't look at the problems. You don't listen to the students. You don't listen to the parents. You don't listen to the teachers. You just want to say, well, the money's here, we can do this. And where the money's coming from is the ones making the programs. Why aren't we listening to teachers? Why aren't we listening to students and parents or taxpayers? Personally, I think these are going to have to start because we're not giving up. And we are not just this couple in the room. We are thousands and millions across the United States. This is the one thing that put us together. And isn't it kind of ironic? What's the date? 9/11. 9/11 happened, we united. Well, this is our 9/11. Cut the porn, cut the standard testing. And did you ever actually look at what you're doing according to Chapter 4? 5 plus 5 doesn't have to equal 10. It can be 9 or 11 if you can explain how you got it. I'm sorry, 5 plus 5 will always be 10 in my book. How do they give you change? Go to McDonald's and see somebody that don't know how to get change. That's Common Core. We're going to give them a project, or we're going to weigh them through. How can you justify that? That's not education. Education is knowing what's right and what's right and what's wrong is wrong. And helping them to get to that point and doing the best they can. Not passing them on because 11 is close to 10. So I'm sorry, I just hope that this 9/11 don't crash us like the towers coming down, that youth will go home, take a look at it. I don't expect you to read everything because it's a lot, but at least take a look at it and get an idea. Common Core is not good for Pennsylvania. It's going to break us where we're already broken. And here are the facts. So I hope you take a look. Thank you for letting me share with you, and I'll pass the papers now to you, so if there's anything else.
I'll get them from you. I'll collect
Oh,
them
you
and
will?
pass them out.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to ask a quick question. Or no?
Well, you can. but-
Very quick question. Is your position that you would like to go back to the former way of testing, or is it that you emphasize that, or is it a different position?
The position on testing I'm looking at is that Pennsylvania takes their own standardized testing, not hooked to national testing. And I think you do have to have a basic understanding of what's being tested in your thing, but not a national testing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. In the interest of time, I don't want to squash any comment, but if it gets redundant, which it hasn't so far, it's remarkable, but if it gets redundant, just, try to, if you have new ideas, new comments, that would be great.
I'm here for finding our head.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Again, my name is Susan Buzzin, and I am from Chester County. And I do have 2 questions that I would like, hopefully, to be addressed. I pay local school taxes, and up until now, I feel as though I have been represented and listened to in my school district. How are we, as members of these school districts, supposed to have our grievances heard when the federal government will be largely in control of what our kids learn? Is this not taxation and education without representation? My second point in question is, the Department of Education says that data mining will be part of the core curriculum. In 2010, the National Center for Education Statistics released a brief called Guidance for Statewide Longitudinal Data Systems, or SLDS for short, which formulated a detailed plan for data stewardship in education. This includes extracting personally identifiable information that includes parents' names, address, social security number, date of birth, place of birth, and mother's maiden name. But according to the SLDS brief, quote, sensitive information will also be extracted which delves into the intimate details of students' lives, such as political affiliations or beliefs of the student or parents, mental and psychological problems of the student or the student's family, sex behavior or attitudes, illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, and demeaning behavior, critical appraisals of individuals with whom respondents have close family relationships, legally recognized privileged or analogous relationships, such as those of lawyers, physicians, and ministers, religious practices, affiliation, beliefs of the student or the student's parents, the income of the family. In a recent report by the Department of Education, they emphasized the use of, quote, facial recognition cameras, posture analysis, chairs, pressure mouse, and wireless skin sensors to be used for the garnering of information from children in grades K through 12. I find this alarmingly intrusive and Orwellian. I want to be 100% certain that my children's information is not sold to third-party entities. For example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which largely funds the Common Core Initiative. In closing, I just want to say that I'm a very concerned parent, and I plead with you to consider what I have said today, and to please say no to Common Core. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
name's Anastasia.
Thank you very much. Actually, when I listened to the testimony, Anastasia Probilski, I feel like it is 1984 and the things that people are talking about, honestly, I can't believe, but it's true. And I've done a lot of research. I work for FreedomWorks, and this was brought to my attention at the beginning of this year. And the more I read about it, and the more I learned, and how far Pennsylvania is into the implementation of Common Core is startling. And how do we turn this back? I think that as educators, I've talked to teachers who don't want another test. Right now, it seems that what's happening is there's so many tests that it's taken the ability for a teacher to use her unique skills that she went to school for to zone in for that one child. And so we have educators that don't like the testing. They don't like the Common Core standards. You have parents that are concerned that do not like the Common Core standards. And yet it seems that our Commonwealth, without our knowledge, signed up for this a few years ago. And as a parent, I represent a grassroots organization that has 90,000 members in Pennsylvania. On behalf of those members, and as far as the teachers and the people in my community, what do we do to stop the implementation of Common Core? And don't just say, oh, we changed the name so it's not Common Core. We know, we're educated on this, and I know that the parents that I talk to are not going to stop. And I just, that is basically what I want to see as a taxpayer of Pennsylvania. What can we do? What can we do as parents, taxpayers, to stop the implementation of this horrible program? And will we get a response? I mean, is there anything we can do, like truthfully?
Well, we are listening to you. We're listening to all the comments of all the participants. But we're not going to respond to how you can stop this, because the fact of the matter is the Common Core has already been adopted by Pennsylvania 2 years ago. That's the fact. And when I spoke at the hearing saying that we're trying to get out of that, I was sort of mocked by the other participant here. But the fact is, we're in it. And what we're doing in terms of the revision is in essence getting out. But
So
you
we
folks
can
don't
unwind
hear
it?
that.
We're trying to unwind
Yes.
it.
Yeah. And in the interest of time, and it hasn't happened yet, but try not to be redundant if you've already made your spiel yesterday or whatever. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Janice Bowman, and I did talk yesterday. I just want to touch on a little bit of information I want to give you that you requested or stated, and some other things. Today I want to start with a little article, which I will be giving to you later. It was actually from the World Socialist website. I do all my own research, because I know I can't trust the reporters too much anymore. So one of their questions is, what is the Common Core U.S. Education Initiative? And I thought, man, they got to be in support of this. But they wrote, under the scheme, all children, starting as young as 5 years old, will be tested to see if they are college or career ready. Those deemed unworthy of advancement to college will be channeled into trade skill track. They also stated the movement towards tracking every young student, either for college or workplace, after high school is part of the promotion of a new normal, of mass unemployment and low-paying jobs. For decades, a college education was presented as the only means to lift them up. Now, even larger sections of political and corporate establishments are insisting that college education should not be deemed necessary. This corresponds with the estimates by employers, 25% of new jobs, which is true. You get laid off and you find out you got an $8 to $10 job. You don't need a high school education in the next years. So that's what Common Core is. I did look up the function of the U.S. Department of Education, because I'm having trouble understanding how the national government, federal, can come into us here and tell us what to do. And actually, the function is, the federal government and Department of Education are not heavily involved, which I can't figure where they got this, in determining curriculum or education standards, with the recent exception of No Child Left Behind. This has been left to state and local school districts. The quality of education institutions and their degrees is maintained through informal private process known as accreditation, over which the Department of Education has no direct public jurisdiction control. Well, I don't see that happening here. Also, I gave you a list of related legislation. You want to do a study, look at it from 1965 to 2010, what money you took from the feds, what mandates were funded, unfunded, how it affected the schools' budgets, and how it's not working. Why are we continuing to do the same thing when we're only getting 7 to 10% from federal money and we're being judged and pushed by that? So I have that for you there. Yesterday I brought up, which you weren't here, Senator and the rest, the National Sexuality Standards. It has come to our attention that some of the books in the school are as bad as porn, and I am very upset. I have brought it to the board. Now, I was told it's the local school districts picking the books, but it's you making the standards, so you are part of the blame. And I am again bringing it up. I want it looked into, that we don't have porn books in the schools. And I don't know which schools had it because I'm being told I need an attorney to get the list of the books I have. So, you also asked about sexual ed standards. It's under the Pennsylvania Code, Title 22, Chapter 4, Section 29. It's called the Academic Standards for Health, Safety, and Physical Education. What I would suggest is look at that, look at this, and see if it's not matching, and if we need to change some things to prevent porn from being in schools. I gave you the actual article from where I found this here. The next thing I have for you is, this is a study I did on Allentown of their federal and state budgets. 1996, we had 4.1% of federal money in Allentown. We had 11.43% in 2011. Now, we're going up little by little, but it's costing us more as taxpayers. We're getting more money, and we're failing more. So something should be looked into why that's happening. That money is not helping us. So I'm giving you the actual proof what state and all that is. The other thing I want to talk about is, this is a list of people you're getting who can't be here from June to December 2012. I did a study of who lost their homes due to property taxes. Some of them are in their 39 years. Thanks to school boards that can't afford it. These are people that can't be here that you aren't even thinking about. So I want to give you their names. Then I gave you a letter called the Open Letter to Governor Parnell requesting withdrawal from SBAC. Governor Parnell is the governor of Alaska. Alaska actually did not accept Common Core, but it's being slipped in the door the same way it came here in June, 4 years ago when you weren't in session, and it just came right in because Governor Rendell signed it. Now we got Corbett signing it. Now we have passing the bill here now, but they're not in session doing the same thing. But in this letter from Parnell, he actually brought up Governor Corbett. I don't know if you know that, but it says, the nation knows that ExxonMobil wrote a letter reminding Governor of Pennsylvania their philanthropic contribution recently to the Governor of Pennsylvania when that state began reconsideration of their implementation of the Common Core at the behest of the Senate Democrats in that state. Of course, I'm certain that you have enough backbone to stand up to ExxonMobil desires to have Common Core implemented. If you were to implement the Common Core curriculum based on the word of ExxonMobil, this would certainly make SB 21 look like the crony capitalism rather than the application of supply-side economics. If you go on here, you can click and get the letter. To me, it looked like a mafia letter, and I was just wondering if maybe you've got the same copy. Because ExxonMobil is owned by Bill Gates. So you want to look that up. The last thing, there's one thing on here I'd like you to read. You asked me
Ma'am,
for
excuse me for a
really
second.
quick. This
Yeah,
is,
you're gonna have to
1
wrap it
minute.
up because most of the stuff is irrelevant, but just keep
I
going.
know it's relevant to you, but it's irrelevant
No, it's
to me
irrelevant
as a taxpayer.
to the
Okay.
germane
I
to
will
this
wait.
argument, but you're taking up
I have
valuable time
this,
for other
I
people.
want you to read is the Declaration of Independence, which a teacher wrote. This is where I stand. But the last thing I want to do is ask any of the senators or House of Representatives in here. I want to know who gives a committee, like a school board or any committee, the power to vote on a subject that is on hold by the governor. Because the governor wrote a letter holding the Common Core. The Senate and House are working on issues with Common Core, and we're not going to vote on it until they did the studies, talk to their taxpayers. I vote for the governor, I vote for the senators and House of Representatives. I don't vote for you. How do you overpower the governor that put it on hold to vote today? So anybody that says yes, I will be talking to every senator, House of Representative, governor individually why you have the authority to vote on something on hold that is not taken off a hold.
Good.
I want to know how. And if it's 6 years of terms that you have in office, I want you, Senator Dimmerman, about anybody in here. We need 1-year term for these type of people. If power control goes to their head, they can overpower a governor and the whole Congress. We need a change. So please look into that. Thank you. Don't vote on it today.
That's it? Okay. Good morning. Michelle Jansen. I'm from Chambersburg. I run a civics organization out there for educating community members on issues. And one of our issues has been, of course, the establishment of a Common Core state standards, or the PA standards is now we're referring to them in the revisions. I think my biggest issues, just very generally, are still some concerns about whether these standards are going to be effective and good. I think the math concerns and the developmentally appropriate, especially the lower grades concerns with some of the requirements that are made, I think are the two biggest things that I've heard about that I think we should all be aware about and concerned and keep an eye on. The other, of course, as Senator Dinniman has pointed out many times, the costs. And we're all very concerned about that. I think I listened carefully to the hearing on the Keystone test, and it seemed like the final talking point it came down to was the cost of the tests themselves and whether that's an unfunded mandate. And I understand, I don't think you all feel it is, because we already had the testing and we already had money for that. But to me, it was more of the other issues that were brought up during the meeting. It's the things that are generated by the tests, the remediation, the project-based assessments, and that kind of thing. I think that's more where our unfunded mandate is coming from, and I think that's something that still bears a lot of examination. And I know you all are working together trying to get some statements of cost, and I'm really hoping that comes along and we all do understand that, because I think that's a big concern. And also, I know Dr. Demarest and I have talked, and we plan to have a meeting about how the data collection is a huge concern to me. And again, we hear about stuff going on in other states, and I realize that's not necessarily germane to our conversation. But I think we do need to be concerned, because there seems like there has been a big push through some grants we've gotten from the federal government setting up our state longitudinal database, and how working with the Common Core initiative, not just the standards, but the initiative that's stated in the Race to the Top applications, and now in our waiver that we just got granted by the federal government for the No Child Left Behind. How those all work together in terms of data that's being collected now that's not necessarily objectionable at all. I've seen what our school districts are collecting, and there's nothing terribly objectionable about that. But it's the potential for why these databases were created, what could be required by the federal government down the road, the changes to the FERPA laws and protections of privacy that seem a little vague and open to not necessarily giving the data to the federal government, but allowing access to data by the federal government, by vendors of education who are now considered educational experts to improve education, that kind of thing. So to me, those are the broadest concerns that I have, that I think we need to pay attention to. And I'm really trying to understand where those contracts that we've signed with the federal government, what are we obligated to? I've heard some personal comments that perhaps we're not obligated to everything we agree to in the Race to the Top applications, but I'm trying to get a handle on who can answer those questions for me and for all of us, so we understand exactly what are Pennsylvania's obligations in terms of data collected on our students and what that could evolve to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, yes, sir. Jerome. Who'll be next? I have to keep everything in order here, I'll get confused.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the board. I'm Joan Paul Flynn. I chair the Education Committee for the Pennsylvania State Conference of NAACP units. I'm a teacher. I've spent 40 years teaching. And I have no objection to rigorous curriculum. I'm here because the Keystone exams need to be separated from the core as graduation criteria. The first speaker referred to Massachusetts, and I want you all to be aware that Massachusetts has a trauma-sensitive education system. And on its website, there are all sorts of resources for teachers to draw from to deal with children who live in adverse conditions. We advocate for a trauma-informed education system in Pennsylvania. It would do much to end dropout. It would do much to end suicide. It would do much to raise the scores in the Commonwealth. So I just ask you all to do some consideration of the following few questions. In your review of testimony concerning using the Keystones as the graduation criteria, have you analyzed what it takes for a student to successfully meet the cutoff score for proficiency? Have you looked at what materials a child must have in the school building? Have you looked at what technology is necessary for a child to master the constructs embedded in the test? Have you looked at what kind of background knowledge students need in order to successfully master this test? Have you looked at the human resources that need to be in place? Have you looked at the emotional supports that need to be in place for children who are struggling with adversity? And have you looked at the home environments that are conducive to success on a rigorous, life-defining test? If you have not looked into those things, how then do you judge that this is a fair thing to do to young people? And then I listened to the comment about children learning to face difficult tasks. And I wonder if you've thought about, when you close your eyes and look at these kids, who do you see? Some are homeless. Some are in foster care and struggling with grief and loss. Some are in homes where there's physical abuse. Some are being sexually molested. Some of these children are in homes with alcoholic or drug-addicted adults. Some of these children live with terminally ill loved ones for whom they give care. Some of these children have an incarcerated parent or two incarcerated parents. The Prison Society suggests that probably 100,000 Pennsylvania children have an incarcerated parent. They are dealing with shame and grief and loss and fear every second of the day. Some have come to this country and don't have academic level English proficiency. The latest statistic I heard was that 81% of these children cannot pass the Keystone. Some live in chaotic communities. where they're afraid to walk to school. Truancy level is high. The children are traumatized. Some are ill. Some are debilitated. Some have no vision or dental care. Some of these children are on strong medications. Some are suffering school phobia, math phobia, reading phobia. Some of the children that have to take this test have come to this country from war-torn zones. They sit in class and have flashbacks. They have night terrors. These are the children who don't do well on high-stakes tests. Now, when you vote today, you are casting your ballot on the life of these kids. You hold their lives in your hands. And I just beg you not to take that lightly. All these young people have potential. They need their diploma to work their way out of the negative circumstances with which they contend every day, the difficult, really difficult issues of fighting for their lives inch by inch. And they will become highly productive, successful citizens if they have access to their future. You can make it impossible for these people, or you can give them life. You have immense, immense power over their futures. I ask you to reflect on that. I ask you to have the moral stamina and the courage to protect these young people.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. My name is Dr. George Steinhoff. I'm the superintendent of schools in the Pendelco School District. I also currently serve as the chair of the Delaware County Chief School Officers Association. I'm here today to share with you perspectives and concerns regarding the use of Keystone examination results as a graduation requirement. I have no doubt that the original goals that preceded the development and the implementation of Keystone exams likely had merit. There's no question about that. But somewhere along the way, these goals have morphed into a graduation requirement and policy that is unquestionably unpopular, it's unproductive, is unfunded, and ultimately unnecessary in my opinion. The Keystone graduation requirement is widely unpopular for so many reasons. It's clear that the compelling argument for a Keystone graduation requirement has yet to be made. I know of no major professional organization that represents the experts and the practitioners and the leaders in our field who support the use of Keystone exams as an additional graduation requirement. Parents ask what this new requirement tends to fix. My mother said to me she thinks that it's a solution that's in search of a problem. Students see it as a high-stakes hurdle that impedes their learning time and it distracts their attention from advanced placement tests, SAT tests, ACT tests, things that will be measured on school performance profiles, and of course their individual class assignments that we all too often forget about. Educators know that it's going to have the effect of narrowing the curriculum, precisely what experts caution us about time and again. Principals wonder where they're going to find the time in their school schedule to offer Keystone remediation classes. Superintendents and board members struggle to determine which effective and proven programs are going to have to be cut so that they can fund Keystone-related supports and remediation. Collectively, the people who are closest to the field and most affected by Keystone graduation requirements keep asking, why are we doing this? The Keystone graduation requirement doesn't advance the learning and achievement needs of the best and brightest students, our average students, or even our struggling learners. Smart students who are carrying 4.0 GPAs, they pass multiple AP tests, they're scoring at exemplary levels on the SAT. They see these tests as an unnecessary intrusion, especially during the spring testing cycle, which occurs during the AP testing period as well. Average students stress at the prospect of losing the opportunity to take relevant and interesting elective courses that can shape their college and career aspirations. They wonder why they have to prove to the state, after already proving to their teachers in the school, that they have in fact learned the essential concepts of algebra, literature, and biology. They know if they fail the Keystone, they're going to be assigned to a remedial class, which will carry the statement of their performance clear for all their friends to see. And struggling learners, students who question the relevance and importance of school perhaps, or even average students who simply don't test well, they see this graduation requirement as another card that's stacked against them. Students who aren't academically inclined, who still come to school and tolerate and they attend to their core subjects, might instead really excel at the arts or technical or business-oriented courses. And for them, those courses are critical to their overall success. We risk losing them. We risk having them drop out if they learn that they can't take those classes because they're stuck in an unending cycle of remediation. School districts are learning that the Keystone graduation requirement is not free, it's costly. Given the high stakes, students and parents will demand and PDE will require remediation, retesting, and supplemental instruction. Without additional funds, school districts like mine will be forced to pass along the new expense to taxpayers or draw upon resources that were otherwise allocated. And in practice, this could mean taking away staff at the elementary level to fund staff at the secondary level. Do we really want to pull staff away from elementary class sizes reduction so that we can fund additional remediation teaching programs at the high school? Money could be better spent on proven programs that we know. In closing, I just offer a question. If the Keystone exams were decoupled from the graduation requirement, who would object? Certainly not students, not parents, and not teachers. The vast majority of school and district administrators, school board members, and superintendents would not object. Believers in local control, researchers who show how test-driven school policy is bad policy, advocates for the disabled, and students with special needs, they would not object to the decoupling of Keystone examinations and high rigor standards to an additional duplicative graduation requirement. But most telling to me, it's the parents who I have found will fight the hardest to demand the best things for their kids. They are not the ones who will object. In fact, most of them would applaud it. If the most important stakeholder groups do not support additional graduation requirements tied to a high-stake test, if they don't understand what problem the requirement attempted to fix, and they won't object to seeing it go away, then perhaps it is cause for pause. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your efforts to improve education in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Next, long. He came in and they didn't recognize you. Thank you.
Morning, Chairman Whitty, Acting Secretary Dumrest, which I hope quick to be Secretary Dumrest, and my fellow chairs on Education Committee, Chairman Roebuck and Chairman Clymer. Just real quick, I graduated, I'm not going to tell you what year, you'll date me, in the 60s, and SAT scores were much higher than they are today on average. No national standards, no state standards. And Secretary Dumrest and I have had several conversations, a lot of dynamics here. And I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to give you a real quick piece of Cato. This is empirical evidence, not anecdotal, as we're told for Porter Township, and what we've heard here. A lot of anecdotal evidence. This is empirical. Really, really quick. The first test is the Program for International Science Assessment. Some that did higher than the United States had national standards. Some that did lower than the United States had national standards. Some that did higher than the United States had no national standards. The next one is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that test. Same result, mixed. Standards, including the 1994 and the No Child Left Behind, have not achieved academic excellence. That is not what does it. The classroom does it. And I know Secretary Dumrest and I'm urging you to delay 26 citations in here that you can research. Actual empirical data on national standards. Thank you. I need to leave.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. That was Representative Tolman.
Yeah, I wish I would have waited and gone after all of us, put it that way.
Well, You should have sat in the front row. Go ahead.
My name is Denise Nahum. I'm founder and executive director of the Educational Enrichment Initiative, which is the acronym TEEI. We support over 50 centers throughout the state of Pennsylvania that provide supplemental educational services to 5,000 students. Our students range those who can barely afford a very meager tuition to those who come to us for enrichment because they have second graders doing algebra. We have a huge range of students that come to us. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'd like to bring attention to, most notably, the audience that the supplemental education services in Pennsylvania are required to be licensed as private schools. There is no provision for private businesses operating as academic supplemental services in Pennsylvania. I would encourage you to look at a franchise like a Sylvan, a Huntington, a Kumon, a Mathnasium, and Athena Learning Center. Compare New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has 75% less, 25% of what New Jersey has in terms of private supplemental enrichment programming. That is directly because of the department's strict regulations requiring them to go through privately licensed regulations. We support the core standards, absolutely. I think that our centers would welcome very explicit and specific skills that children need in order to thrive in today's market. However, I cannot agree with the Keystone exams being a requirement for partial graduation unless you have the supplemental services in place for those students. This comes down to cost. Our centers, the people that are attending those centers are paying for supplemental services out of their pocket. Again, the range is huge. We provide scholarships to those who cannot afford. I don't see any cost coming towards supplemental services, and I really don't see how this Keystone exam can be a requirement without supplemental support. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now, before we go to the action